Hey, I'm Mike from Retro Boost. Got a question for you. You own a lot of game consoles? How do you manage them? Well, there's a lot of ways to do it, and I'm gonna go over 3 different ways, technically 4, but 3 major ways to get all your game consoles consolidated to one kind of switching solution that'll be a convenient way to manage your inputs and outputs to your TV, or in my case, my capture system. Whatever will work for you. We'll go over Extron matrix switchers. We'll go over alternatives to that, like regular component composite switches you can buy off of, say, Amazon, or similar places like that. And then finally, we'll go into a pretty nifty kind of hybrid option of the first 2 that Castlemania has available. So something for everyone here. Extron's gonna be the focus because out of all these things, it's the one that's not plug and play, but there are some perks and cool things about it for the enthusiast crowd. The other 2 options, like the regular switches and the Castlemania thing that I'll go over, those are like plug and play, so they'll be simple, so I can just kind of talk about them. I don't own the Castlemania one, but I can show it off since it is related to this topic. So we're gonna dive into Extron first, go over what's involved, we'll go over what it is, and we'll go what's involved with getting hooked up and using it for managing multiple game consoles. If you find the video helpful, don't forget to subscribe. It helps me out as I grow the channel. But let's get into talking about Extron Crosspoint matrix switchers. Fancy title. So talking about the Extron matrix switchers, I guess the first question to answer would be, what is a matrix switcher? Well, it's a really fancy way of saying that you got multiple inputs and multiple outputs, which can be active at the same time. Say with these matrix switchers here by Extron, this has 8 inputs, so I could have 8 game consoles, for example, plug into it, and then 4 outputs, so I could have 4 of those game consoles output out of each one of those outputs, thus having them all active. If I had 4 TVs, I could have each one of those 4 outputs be a different source. So N64 here, GameCube there, PS1 there. You know what I mean. Am I gonna do that? Well, of course not. I use at most 2 at a time. The advantage to something like this is that someone that does like a lot of recording, for example, like I do for this show, I have multiple game capture cards, so I could have, say, a dedicated output for a component that goes to one of my capture cards, and then a dedicated output for a composite that goes to a different one. So when I want to switch it up and go from capturing Wii to capturing Super Nintendo, as opposed to having to crawl back there and change around cables, I'm just pressing buttons on the front of the Extron Switch. Very, very convenient. The one thing that's not convenient is how you get these things set up, because you can't just plug these things directly into it, at least not for most of the ones I've seen. They use a type of input called BNC. So let's talk about the kind of adapters you'll need to plug in retro game consoles into these things. We're gonna focus on component and composite. We'll go into the BNC conversion for component and composite, and also the audio, because the audio inputs are also their own little monster. So let's talk about these input types first here. So first we've got the component composite, we'll just call it RCA to be simple. We got RCA to BNC. As you can see, looks pretty straightforward. RCA can go in one side, and then you got the BNC thing, kind of looks like a coaxial type point on it on the other. Now these little adapters are pretty cheap, and you can get them in large quantities off of places online. You can get big bags of them that have plenty of things on them. So these are what we're going to be using for the video cables. The yellow for composite and the blue, green, and red for a component will plug into these. RCA, and then you just click it into the back of the Extron Switch. It actually has like a locking click to it, which is pretty cool. It's very satisfying to like, fun project. I love little tinker toys like this. So there's solution 1. We get our video signals here. Now what about audio? This isn't what audio uses. Now these Extron switches have a really wacky type of audio input that I had actually never seen nor heard of before I started diving into this stuff. You need to adapt the RCA audio that these cables use into this little funky type of audio input. Now something like this is sometimes referred to as a Phoenix adapter. Ooh. Now this specific part you can actually order from a store called Retro Gaming Cables UK. Understand the UK part. This is an international situation here. We have to import these bad boys. That was the biggest delay for me doing this video, because I had to do 2 different orders to get both of these Extron switches up and running with these. Now, I've heard that you can make your own if you're savvy enough. That is not me. I ordered it. Their ordering process was great. It arrived pretty timely considering it was international. And they even like wrote out a little thank you in pen on the second order that I did. So they're cool guys up there, Retro Gaming Cables UK. I like it. So get yourself these 2 pieces, the RCA to BNC adapter for the video part of it, and then the RCA to Phoenix adapters for the audio part of it. It is very important to note also that there are dedicated input and output versions for these adapters. Not the BNC ones, these are 2-way, but the Phoenix ones. They are blue for input and red for output. You need to get whatever combination you want. You need to get the right quantity of both. So if I was gonna bring this entire Extron switch to life, I would have to get 8 inputs and 4 outputs. So 8 blue, 4 red to get it up and running. Once we get all those plugged in, we're pretty much good to go, and we can use the switch now. So we can talk about kind of how it works in basic. Depending on how you get these, which is usually, well, I would say always pre-owned, you may want to look into factory resetting it, which is a very simple process before trying to use it. Apply power while holding these 2 buttons I'm going to highlight here. Apply power while these are held down. So hold them down, then plug it in, and it'll blink and do a factory reset. If that doesn't work, sometimes if you hold the escape button while giving it power, that can also trigger a reset. I've tried both. Both have yielded results for me. The manual says it's these 2 video buttons, audio and video buttons. Anyway, so once it's all set up, I can show you now like basic operation of switching inputs. Now right away, some people might be wondering why I have 2 of them. Well, I needed more than 8 to get everything that I own up and running. Is there any downside to having 2? In the sense that I'm daisy chaining them, so one is connected to the other. The top one is connected to the bottom one, and I'll show how that switching process works to get it working. I mean, probably, but if there is a downside, it's not noticeable. Every jump that a signal makes, you know, is going to create resistance. The nice thing is these Extron switches are powered, so as the signal actually goes through the unit itself, it should suffer no degradation. The jump that it makes to convert to BNC and back again, you know, that probably creates some kind of resistance, I'm sure. But again, if there is a problem, I'm not seeing it compared to doing it direct. Anyway, just wanted to point that out because people may be wondering, why do you have 2? Well, I wanted to try out getting 2. You can buy units that have more than 8 inputs, by the way. They're a lot more expensive than these are, but they do exist. I want to say I saw one that had like 24 or something like that. The thing was enormous though. Like it was as big, if not bigger, than what it looks like to stack 2 of these 8 input ones on top of each other. I want to say it was actually bigger, but they do exist. Anyway, just wanted to get that out there. Let's talk about switching inputs. Now that all of our stuff is plugged in, all of our Tinker toys are attached, the BNC converters, the little Phoenix adapter, who's-its. Once everything is connected, I mean, you can now use the system. Again, you may need to factory reset it, you might not have to, it just depends on how you get it. But for the most part, these Extron switches are pretty plug and play. Basic operation, you can change inputs and assign outputs pretty easily. All you have to do is tap the number of the source you want to use, it'll light up, then you choose the output path you want it to take, because remember, you have up to 4. I never use more than 2 personally, but we select our source, we select our output, and then just hit enter on the button on the side, and ba-boom, you're passing that output out now. It's active, it's good to go. When you have 2 switches like mine, you just gotta make sure that one of your outputs on the top switch, in my situation, leads to one of the inputs on the bottom switch. So I would select the source, select that particular output, and then on the second switch, same thing. I select that particular input, and then I select my new output, and that passes whatever the original device was from the top switch all the way down through and out the bottom switch. a little convoluted, but when you do it, you get really used to it pretty quick, and it's not that big of a deal. Especially when you label it, you can make your own labels for it. There at one point existed like professional labels you could find for these too. You can probably still find those in certain places. There was a website that shut down that used to do it, from what I could tell, and like eBay had a couple of sellers offering them. You can just make your own though, whatever works for you. But operating, it's pretty simple. You just click the source, click the output, and you're done. So just to give a couple of examples, just kind of switching here between different game consoles, it's a very easy process. Just select here, select there, go. I can switch between any of them. As long as I'm not switching between like different types of cable outputs, it's very seamless. If I were to be messing around with, say, component going out to a RetroTink 2X Pro M, and I just switched to a composite source, like if I went from Wii to N64, like that would cause some temporary problems because the RetroTink would be on that particular little 480p input source, and the image would probably either not come through right, or if it did, it would come through kind of jacked up. But the benefit of having multiple outputs on Extron is, again, I have my dedicated output that goes to each of my 2 different RetroTinks. So I would just have to switch between different capture cards in OBS in that situation. That's the benefit to those multiple outputs. It makes it so simple. For the casual crowd, that is probably never something that you'll take advantage of. If you're just buying one of these to go to a TV, I really can't imagine a situation where you would really pine for that multiple output situation, unless you had multiple TVs for whatever reason, and you just didn't want to change plugs. I mean, maybe? It's possible, I guess. I'm trying to think of a situation where it'd be useful. For someone that does like production work, it's definitely cool because, like I said, I have multiple capture cards, I got this multiple RetroTink devices, so it's definitely great for minimal cord messing around situations with my situation here. So that's Extron in a nutshell. Just get the right parts, stick them on, and then from there it's pretty much plug and play. So if you don't want to invest in a science project like this, which is understandable, you're looking for a much more affordable solution to get a similar solution out of this problem, having multiple game consoles, or you just want like a more plug and play type situation and you did want multiple out, we got 2 other options for you. First, let's talk about doing like regular switches. So a good first alternative are switches like these. These you can find on Amazon. The prices are usually pretty cheap. They're typically under $50 for either one of these 2 options. But there are composite options like this one. They have 8 inputs, 1 output. You just press the buttons on the front to choose whatever you want to play. So, oh, there's my NES, or okay, we're gonna do N64 now. Oh, I want to do PS2, boom. Whatever your consoles are, you just plug them all in the back. 1 output goes to your TV or whatever thing you're using, and you're good to go. I was using this up until like the end of last year because I didn't get RetroTink until like late December, but I really wasn't using it to its fullest effect until way after that. So like a lot of my earliest videos talking about stuff like, say, Gex and the N64 Spider-Man, those were running through this. So great, cheap solution. I mentioned earlier, since it isn't powered, there probably is like a little bit of degradation as the signal goes through it, but it's really not noticeable if there is much of any. It just depends, I guess, on you and how much you notice that kind of stuff. So not much of a downside. A lot of people use these. For component, there are dedicated component versions like this one. There aren't as many inputs as the other versions are, like that composite one had 8. I haven't seen an 8 solution one for a component, but they're probably out there. But same idea, you plug all your consoles in here. So this is component, so like Wii, PS2, original Xbox all have component solutions. Plus you can mod consoles or get special cables that allow for component to be used. Either way, so component sources go in, 1, 2, or 3. Again, I used this exact thing for a while. Let me think here. The Luigi's Mansion video I did, the capture footage was captured through this guy. So reliable solution. Now the component one prices, those can fluctuate. I've seen them get as high as like $50, $60. I think I bought that one for somewhere around the $30 mark, if I remember correctly. So if you're looking for a much cheaper, much simpler, way more user-friendly plug-and-play type experience, switches like that are a great alternative compared to, say, doing Extron. Only thing you wouldn't get with these is the multiple out, which again for the casual crowd probably isn't a huge loss to you. But one final option, a hybrid of the two. Lastly, we have a Switch offered by Castlemania Games. Now this is a company that I haven't had much dealing with. I bought a power supply from them for my Super Nintendo and it worked out fine. This I became aware of after I really started to dive into the world of Extron stuff. But they do offer a solution very similar. It's a large component composite switch, 8 inputs, 2 outputs. And that sounds familiar, it's just like Extron. Extron has 8 inputs and 4 outputs. But again, I can't imagine someone like even me using more than just 2. So, okay. It has something that Extron switches don't have though, and that is automatic switching. So pressing a button can be very convenient as opposed to ripping out cables and whatnot. But what's even easier? Well, when it's automatic, of course, which is what this one is, so that's pretty nifty. It is a little pricey though, $240 US. One thing I forgot to mention is how much Extron costs. You can find like a pre-owned Extron Crosspoint 300, which is the type that I'm using here, anywhere from like the $50 to $80, maybe even $100 price point. At least that's what they were when I bought them, plus your shipping costs. So I paid like right about $90 for my first one, a little more than that for the second one. And then the parts in question, those BNC things are very cheap. The Phoenix adapters were a little more, but I paid probably right around like the $150 to $180 mark to get one of the Extron switches up and running. So it's definitely pricier to do this Castlemania option, but you are paying for convenience, and I think that that's perfectly reasonable for the dollar amount price in question here, because you're getting technically a better solution. That automatic switching is a pretty cool feature. I mean, think about it. You turn off your N64, you turn on your PS1, you're gonna have to walk over there and do that anyway. It isn't like you can have that be automated. Maybe one day, who knows, someone will mod that feature. But you know, you turn it off, turn that one on, and boom, it's automatically switched. And you still have 2 outputs. So for someone like me that has multiple capture solutions, I get the same experience, but even better because automatic switching. This is a product that I do plan on eventually getting and trying out. Extron I definitely like and I've enjoyed them so far, but something a little more modern like this that offers a similar solution is definitely a interesting head turner. So very cool and good to be aware of. So there we have it. 3 different solutions. Well, technically 4 because there's component and composite switches, but I mean I kind of grouped these together. 3 different solutions for organizing your game consoles. Which one do you use, or are you interested in? You're gonna dive into the world of old school retro tech with something like Extron, make it a fun little science project. You're gonna take it the real easy way and just do something like this. I imagine that most people watching that are into retro gaming probably already own stuff like this. It's just so accessible. Or I want to hear feedback. If you own the Castlemania gcomp switch, I'd be curious to hear your feedback because it is something that I am interested in myself. It seems to offer something very similar to Extron, only really better just because it isn't a giant old school box thing. I get that the biggest barrier to entry for Extron isn't so much the project aspect of it, but probably just the size. Not everyone can make something like that work, and that's understandable. So I'd be curious to hear your feedback on it. Either way, thank you for joining me there. I appreciate you checking it out. Don't forget to subscribe if you found the video helpful or entertaining. I appreciate it. It helps me grow the channel. And you all have a great rest of your day.